Welcome to the weekly Woodcast and our first Zoom meeting on the Woodcast with Dennis and Michael Woodworth. And we have somebody on the line tonight that I've known, well, since he's been a young boy. Lived in our community, grew up in our community, raised by a great family, by the Snyder family. And I'm very pleased to have you here tonight. Matt Snyder, all the way from British Columbia tonight.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
You know, Matt, it's funny. It's coast to coast now, right? You've literally gone from coast to coast, which is pretty cool.
Sure is. Yeah.
We drove a lot of miles together in the basketball days and enjoyed a lot of success and a lot of fun stories. And we're going to share some stories tonight that I think people in society really need to hear. You have a great story, and it's far from over. You're not even 30 years old yet, so getting close, though, Matt. You're getting close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing to think that you're almost 30 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm only 40.
I know. Yeah.
One could only wish, right?
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning. So before we talk about what you're doing right now, and I love what you're doing right now. And I know a lot of people are following those stories and your blogs and all that kind of stuff. But let's get into first kind of a foundation. So let's just tell them basically, you grew up where you grew up, how you grew up, and who you grew up with, and then we'll go from there. So let's start back in the Bridgewater days.
Yeah. So, I went to Bridgewater Elementary, started out there. I used to go to preschool, like at the United Church in Bridgewater, and then kind of grew up playing sports through BES and played anything I could kind of get my hands on, with, tennis lessons in the summer, or I played a lot of soccer as well as a goalkeeper. I really enjoyed being a goaltender, and then moved into basketball in like grade 4 and 5 and 6. I think I started playing, and that's where kind of my love of sports went for the most part was with that. Grew up in behind the old the new hospital over on Pinehurst Avenue. I had a great time. A lot of fond memories of playing outside until the streetlights came on. That was still kind of my my days. Played a lot outside, had a lot of good friends, and then kind of grew up and went on to Bridgewater Junior Senior High, where I continued on with basketball and kind of my journey with sports, and had a great time there. And yeah.
Your parents were really big on balance, educationally and athletically.
Yeah.
Big on relationships, that you had solid relationships in school, and that balance. I always knew your mother and father as two very solid human beings that really genuinely loved their kids and really wanted the best for them in every area, and they really taught that balance. So tell me a little bit about your parents.
Yeah, so my dad is James Snyder. He worked for the school board for years, an accountant. He's a wonderful, jolly guy. Most people know him as that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Loves to chat, start up a conversation, but he's a family man for sure. Like a lot of my core values are focused on him and what he taught me growing up, and my grandparents as well. We spend a lot of time with them up New Germany way, but with Dad, he was always focused on family. You take care of your family, and even your parents, your grandparents, extended family, you do what you can to take care of them, whether that's family like medical appointments or family gatherings, making sure that we always kind of had that core value of family first before everything else. And then of course there's my mom, who's taught me so much in being a nurse in the ICU for years, and really kind of classic traditional maritime background, a big family in Miramichi. And mom's story is something else that we'll probably talk about after, but she's
a big part of it.
she's an angel to many. And a big focus for us growing up was competition is great, but it's more of the soft skills around being good with people, and making sure that love, trust, respect are at the forefront before winning is great, but being a part of the team and making sure that we were socially connected to other people was a big focus as well.
It's funny, Matt. Tony Lasorda, not Tony Lasorda, but Tony La Russa, I should say, was the head coach of the championship teams in St. Louis with the Cardinals and the Oakland A's. And he had a motto with his teams that he built, that RTC, which is almost exactly what you said, with every team he built, respect, trust, and care for each other. It's really what he wanted all of his teams to operate under. And it's amazing that you actually, hit it right on the head when you talk about your family.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I had a great upbringing. Like, my parents did the best that they can, and they're awesome. I love them. They're great people. We probably talk more now that I'm out west than when I was living in Halifax, which is like part of my story as well. But it's good. Like, we're really connected, and we've always stayed connected. And then there's my brother Andrew. Athlete extraordinaire, great person.
Yeah,
He's followed.
I won't call him a
in
good
Dad's
kid because he's not a
journey.
kid anymore. So
No, but yeah, he's living in Halifax now and doing great. Great girlfriend, great job, and it's been another beautiful part of growing up with a younger brother that I know that a lot of people can probably, attest to, is that you learn so much. You have the years of fighting and the classic, fighting
I've been there,
older
Matt.
brother.
I've been there.
Yeah, yeah, and you have those years, but now we've like that dropped off pretty quickly in like our early like teens, and it's just such a strong bond that I know that I have someone that I can call all the time and he'd be there in a heartbeat, but also someone to connect deeper with and like to have that support as a brotherly input and as a sibling and as a best friend, like he's always been there for me. So I really had a strong core since the get-go around me. And yeah, it's been great.
I mean, brotherly love should be unconditional love. There shouldn't be a
Yeah.
lot of conditions, right? It should be, hey, we're there for each other no matter what. We don't live perfect lives, but we're there for each other.
Yeah.
Essentially, is what it
Yeah.
should be. And not every brotherly relationship has that. They
Right.
don't. And
Yeah.
when you're fortunate enough to have someone that's like that, it's genuine, and you should really appreciate having a brother that treats you that way.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a wonderful person. He's very level-headed. So anytime, that I'm, I'm very empathetic towards people. And before I used to, probably react more on an emotional level before logic. And for my like late teens, early 20s, he was always like a good logic base. Just
Yeah,
like, let's break it down.
absolutely.
A good some person to go back to, and always have them to chat with and reason through the hard stuff. Yeah.
So let's talk about your career a little bit. What you're currently
Yeah.
doing, what you studied, what you like about it.
Yeah. So, well, I went to Acadia to do kinesiology, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life at that point. It was kind of narrowed down to teaching, to RCMP, and then maybe going on to be a physiotherapist, because that's what the kinesiology was kind of aimed at when I
Right.
initially went. And then in my second year at Acadia, I saw a presentation from a former grad from Acadia who did occupational therapy and was an occupational therapist, and kind of had the similar ideals of like partying in the first and second years, but then realizing that like, okay, I gotta get my shit together.
Gotta get something done here, right? It's costing a little
Yeah,
bit of
and
money to get this thing done, so let's get it done.
yeah. So that really resonated with me, and I just, from year 3 and year 4, I just kind of set goals around getting into grad school, hoping I did. And then when I was on my grad trip in year 4, that's when I got the acceptance letter, and I went on to become an occupational therapist, which is what I am now. So a lot of people that probably don't know, like, as OTs, we're generally pretty comfortable with explaining what the hell we do.
Yeah,
It's a
that was the
relatively,
next question: is to tell the listeners what an occupational therapist does.
yeah. So we focus primarily on people's occupations.
Right.
So that's how people occupy their time
Right.
throughout the day. And there's kind of 3 main areas that we focus on. So there's self-care, productivity and leisure. And self-care is like the things that people do to take care of themselves. So
Right.
brushing their teeth, eating, showering, those kind of things. And then productivity, most people think, oh, well, I have to go to work. But early on in our lives, it's focused on going to school and play as a
Right.
child. And then as we grow up, it starts to go into more school, part-time work, volunteering. And then as we
More
grow up, it
complex,
can look,
more complex,
yeah,
more
more
complex.
complex. And then,
Exactly.
so it's essentially whatever you do to be productive throughout the day.
Mhm.
And then the third area that we focus on is leisure. So, what you like to do for fun and what kind of brings joy during those other hours of your
Absolutely.
life. So if there's any physical, mental, or cognitive illnesses or conditions that are preventing you from getting from participating in those, we have a certain amount of interventions and assessments that can get you back to doing
Okay.
what you want to do. A lot of creativity, a lot of problem solving, a lot of navigating barriers in people's lives. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
a there's a balance. You go back to we talk about your parents, how they had a balance for your life. It's amazing that you're consulting with others to kind of discuss those details the way your parents aspired to raise you,
yeah,
but you're breaking it
yeah,
down on a professional level, not just on
yeah,
a practical level of growing up as a kid in your household.
yeah. It's really fun. I love it. So like I've worked a lot in a lot of different areas, and where I work now is in pediatrics. So I work
Mhm.
primarily with children with autism and
Right.
ADHD, Down syndrome, and whatnot. And this is probably my favorite area that I've worked in. I'm really enjoying it, but OT is like really broad. You can do whatever you want with it, which is really cool. Um, yeah.
What challenges does it present Matt Snyder on a daily basis to consult with people like that has, oh, I call baggage, right? There's just components of baggage along the way, and you're trying to fit the round pegs in the round holes and the square pegs in the square holes. Do you take any of that home with you at the end of the day when people struggle that way? Is it difficult?
I mean, I would say when I like worked in mental health before and like I saw like now I try not to as much
Right.
because but like when you're starting out like as a therapist, and I don't think this is really any different from a physio, from a nurse, from speech, from a doctor, you're really not sure of yourself until like that kind of fifth year. I heard that a while ago from one of my mentors, and she told me that you're never really sure about everything until you hit that like 5 to 10 year mark, because you have a better sense of who you are as a professional. So with that, if you don't have the skills to not take it home, it's great to say don't take it home,
It's-
shut it off.
you're not going to know everything in life. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
you're in Mission Impossible if you think that's the case. I mean, you can have somebody in a career 20, 30 years. Like for myself, my passion, my love is baseball, as you know, and
yeah, yeah,
I've been coaching for 30 years, and I'm far from knowing everything because things you learn new things all the time.
yeah,
There's new
yeah,
findings, there's new things that we learn that
yeah.
are along that journey. So I don't know if there ever is a real destination. It's just there's modifications along the way to better situations for everyone.
Yeah. And like, I think as any kind of health professional, if you haven't accepted that you need to keep learning for the rest of your
Yeah,
career,
it's
then
a
you're not
continuous
really doing
process.
your job. Yeah. You're not really like accepting the full responsibility of what you need to do, because things change all the time. There's older ways of thinking and doing versus now, and there's new ways and new training. And if you're not doing that, then personally, I don't think you're serving whatever client base you have, you know, as well as you could be. Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly nice to be able to help people grow. I know if I could, I look back at some of my mentors, some people that I've worked a lot with along the way that gave me opportunities to better myself as a person, both personally and professionally, and I valued their contribution. So it must be fulfilling for you to be able to contribute to people's lives that way.
Yeah, it's really fun. And like we have a different funding system out here, so it allows kids to see us, like us as therapists, like I work privately, so it's a bit different than being in
Okay.
the hospitals or whatnot. But so progress is slow a lot of the time because there's a lot of developmental things, especially with children with autism,
Right.
that aren't met right away. And so a lot of like activities of daily living, thinking about tasks such as like tying shoes, cutting with utensils, like those kind of things.
That we take for
And
granted
through,
sometimes, right?
yeah, but like being able to see from that kind of, on the very basis of like seeing those skills develop are really cool. But the part that I love the most is a lot of the clients that I see have troubles with emotionally regulating. So I mean that they have a hard time processing the environment around them and being able to regulate their emotions. So being able to control in a certain situation or a certain environment or during session. So seeing kids come in and see me for the first time being really uncomfortable, the trust isn't there, the rapport isn't there yet, to a year and a half to 2 years down the road where they've looked at you for the first time and
Yeah.
they interact, they've built up endurance to see me for 50-minute sessions. And that relationship building is my favorite part of the job. Like, take all the other skills out, like that's what I love the most about being an OT, is interacting with children and being able to help them along their journey, because everyone is different.
One of our
Yeah.
teachers at Bridgewater Junior Senior High School, Alice Bent, was really she was a therapist in her own way as well. I mean, the classroom sessions, the classroom students that she had a lot of challenges,
Yeah.
mentally, physically. We used words, 30 years ago and 40 years ago, special education, and I remember being a grade 7 student, 13 years old, and Alice, because my aunt had some challenges mentally
Yeah.
as a young boy, she would always invite me in to help with the classroom at that time. And it was so fulfilling to see a young boy, one kid's name was Kyle, and he was such a shy kid, and he wouldn't communicate with anybody in the school. But the time I was finished with him by the end of the year, he was like a rock star at BHS. And it felt really good for me to be able to do that for him, because it allowed him to
Yeah.
open up and be more confident, um, be more, comfortable in his own skin, right?
Yeah.
I always try to
Yeah.
say to people is that being different's great. You know, if you strive to be like everybody else in the world, it's boring,
Yeah.
and
It is.
sometimes in school, Matt, we always seem to try to teach each other as students that we all wanted to be the same. We all want to wear the same clothes. We all want to do the same things. And then all of a sudden, when you figure it out, being different is really what it's all about. Being an
Yeah.
individual. Who are you really as an individual compared to just being like everybody
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's funny to think back, and even with the writing that we'll talk about after, like with going through school and experiencing, all the classic, bullying for years and
Yeah.
those kind of things. And if you don't have those skills early on of being able to siphon through the bullshit, it's hard to see how different being different
Mm.
is so beneficial, and thinking different. And I think for me, like, I thought different than a lot of people. I think differently than a lot of
You did.
people and a lot of my friends.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. And I still am today. I'm an extroverted introvert. Like
Yeah.
I always was. Like, I spent a lot of my summers at Blockbuster. I had a few core friends, and that's where I love movies, and I
Yeah.
loved being in that world. Probably because it took me away from a lot of other things in my life that I
Truth.
didn't have to think about.
Mm.
But a lot of the time, I probably developed from an early age an idea that I wasn't like everyone else, so therefore I still attended all of the events. I still played all of the sports, but probably deep down at a young age, I didn't feel like maybe I wanted to be included, but the effort to do that would be to conform to something that I guess my values didn't align with. But I felt bad about it for a long time. It started out pretty early.
You,
So
you you
yeah.
stood out to me as an individual. You had a there's a theme that seemed to come through a lot of the podcasts that we've been doing. It's called empathy, and you had a lot of empathy for people. You really did. You genuinely cared for people. You could. It was noticeable, right? And
Yeah.
that's hard to acquire at a young age. We all seem to be kind
Yeah.
of like all wrapped up in ourselves and our own friends and our own image and all that kind of stuff as a young individual. You had that level of empathy that just it was noticeable as an
Yeah.
adult.
Thanks. Yeah.
You really were you were an older individual in a much younger body in
Yeah.
regards, and that would just say that you were wise beyond your years, right?
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
it's
Yeah.
it's a credit. It's a burden
Yeah.
too. It's a burden at the same
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
because it means you have to think different and you have to make better decisions. And it would be comparable to a guy I've used as an example many times on our podcast is Bartley Sawatsky, who was our valedictorian in 1988. Uh, Bartley just walked a different path, and he didn't let people influence him, making good decisions for himself. But he was a very compassionate and empathetic human being to a multitude of different people. And he was intelligent in school. He was our valedictorian, obviously. He was incredibly talented in music. He was an incredible artist. He played, starting goaltender for the Mustangs in '88, and he was a really good friend. So that's a lot of balance. To have all those things and do well in most of them is very difficult. But he handled
Yeah.
it well. It just, it takes a unique individual, and you're in that category. But like I said, it
No,
comes with
thanks.
some burden because
Yeah. Yeah.
to be that responsible at that young of an age is not easy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where like a lot of it came. Well, I know that a lot of it came from like my parents, not from like, bearing the burden of responsibility, but those core, I would say I didn't have any boundaries set as a kid. And I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of friends who were girls early on, and I
Yeah.
still do today in our core friend group. But I think that like, and I had a few core guy friends, and then when I closer to graduation, really kind of um, meshed in with the other guys that I hadn't hung out with as much, but more so played sports with a lot, and we've been friends, best of friends ever since. But with that comes a lot of taking a lot of other shit, people shit on,
Yeah.
and if you don't have anywhere to filter that,
You
it's
wear it.
just build you wear it.
You
Yeah,
wear it.
essentially.
And you
Yeah,
got to let it, you got to let it go somewhere, and you got to let it go in a positive way. It
yeah,
can't consume you or eat you up. And that's really what I started to see. And that's where I want to lead you now is you found an outlet.
yeah,
You found a way to be able to share yourself and be vulnerable to people in society. And at that, doing that created a lot of relatability
yeah,
to a multitude of different people. I was very proud of you. I was also aware that you were taking a step out of in being very vulnerable. So let's just talk about that exercise that you've gone through is in just recently of the letting that energy out.
yeah. Well, I mean, do you want me to talk about like the first time that I did it
Yeah,
with
yeah,
friends?
absolutely,
Yeah.
sure.
So I guess to give a background, and I can kind of go for a while on this, but to give a background of where I've kind of been with my mental health journey over the past, well, the better part of 10 years. It's been an interesting ride with anxiety and depression. And it kind of, my anxiety started off, I would say that I've been depressed for a long time,
Right.
probably the better part of 15 to 20 years. And a lot of that probably affected my motivation to be active within my household at home as far as chores go, as far as feeling motivated after school, because it took so much out of me. And sports was a good outlet for that. But as I moved on into Acadia, I started experiencing anxiety for the first time. And really that stemmed from breakups that I had in relationships, but also being presented in with new challenges in university of presentations and public speaking, and that's where I first experienced anxiety I didn't know at the time what was going on because I was just felt like I was freaking the fuck out kind of thing. And
Yeah, no
that's like,
kidding.
that's how I explain it. And that's like
That's as
how it
clear as
is.
you can be, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I would go through like the breakups are one thing and dealing with your relationships and breaking up and being dependent on that other person for a long time, especially in our late teens. And it brought a lot of new things that I had no idea how to process. And then on the academic side, with pressure built up from myself, not my parents, not anyone else,
Yeah.
just myself. That's where I started experiencing anxiety for the first time. And it really built up in my third and fourth year at Acadia to where I started missing classes. I lost my grandmother in my third and fourth year. And uh, that, like, we were really good friends. Like, we were card buddies. And, I loved her. And I love my grandfather as well.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time. So that was a big loss for me. And I really started noticing my mental health kind of decline there, but it was more of a hidden factor for many years. Like, I didn't show it on the outside. This would be me in my bedroom kind of thing. And like more so acting, I'd say in my third and fourth years, whenever I'd be home, it would be more of like my mood was really hard to control and definitely taken out on my family, and being really snappy, feeling really depressed, not wanting to get out of bed, feeling anxious about any sort of situation that I had to be put in. So that's kind of where it first started, and then it transitioned on to my master's, and it's kind of where like I developed poor habits around work, around schoolwork, and around, I guess, like showing my self-worth to everyone else and like making that like really important at the forefront of my mind. And it led to a lot of um, detrimental things in my life. I was a lot of lessons, I would say. Because when you get into like university is one thing, and like learning through that process of going through year 1 to 4 and you've graduated, but the reality is that some undergraduate degree, like you generally in today's society, you got to move on depending on what you want to do. But
Right.
if you want to move on to be a therapist or whatnot, you got to take on more education or a doctor or whatever. So with that in my mind and going into my master's, I thought, okay, well, I was really involved at Acadia, but now I have to show myself. And this isn't what I projected to others either. It's just what I thought in my mind. So early on, I developed perfectionist tendencies
Right.
around being a perfectionist, and everything had to be perfect. And if it wasn't perfect, then I wasn't going to do it. So I had to go full force with it. And my first year at Dow, doing my master's, was kind of like, okay, let's get through this. But like the anxiety was always there, and the depression was always there too. I didn't feel great about myself. I didn't feel, I was still trying to find out who I was as Matt Snyder. And throughout my master's, like there's a lot of deadlines, there's a lot of heavy exams around anatomy, neuroscience, those kind of things, and they move quick. So you can't really fall behind. And if you do, like you're kind of screwed. So for me, it was a lot of pressure, and it put a lot of pressure on myself. And I did that to myself, like no one else really did. It was just kind of my perceived idea of what success was looking like at that time. So then moving forward into my graduating year, I took on so much work in organizing committees and social committees and the OT ball and helping write our fundraising play. And on top of neuroscience, pharmacology, research,
Yeah. Been
you
there,
get what
done
I'm
that.
saying. Yeah.
Mm.
So like it was a lot of stuff. Then I was balancing my depression and trying to work out more, and that was inconsistent because I didn't have good routine set up and structure. So then it kept going and going and going, and my anxiety built up to the point where I would have frequent panic attacks in myself, freaking out, being really down on myself about not achieving the perfect grades that my mind had set out to achieve, and not being okay with, just being average. And I think a lot of that early on had to do with comparison to my classmates, self comparison to other people around me, and wanting to be the best at everything that I did. And it really brought me to a point where after graduation, I didn't really want to be around too much anymore, because I had graduated. I was still dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. And now I had graduated, and at that time, so just to give you kind of perspective on where it went from, I graduated in June of 2015, it would have been.
Right.
And, so when you graduate, you're like, okay, well, I did all of those things and they were good.
What
And
next?
what next?
The next chapter,
What's
right?
next? Yeah. So then I moved on to my first job, because there wasn't a lot around Halifax at the time for work as an OT. So I moved on to case management and working at Manulife in Halifax. And I had gone through a bad breakup at the time. So one of my buddies let me live with him for a little while with his parents, which was amazing. And then I finally built up enough money where I could live independently and move up in Spryfield by myself and close to work. And I had my dog Jax, and we lived there and started to live there in the winter of, it would have been 2015. So that's kind of where I guess the story takes a bit of a darker turn.
So before we
Yeah.
go there,
Yeah.
because it's a big learning part for your life and
Yeah.
many others. It really is. You said something earlier about you really were a perfectionist, and Vince Lombardi, arguably one of the greatest coaches in professional sports, they named the Super Bowl trophy after him.
Yeah.
He used to tell his athletes, he would say, "Gentlemen, we're going to seek perfection, knowing we can never achieve it, but in the process, we will have achieved excellence, and that'll be more than enough." So if you identify and you understand that you're seeking perfection, but you understand that you'll never achieve it, but in the process, Matt Snyder is going to be at a level in his professional career that's going to be, a strong candidate for most positions of appointment. But I think sometimes we put so much pressure on us ourselves that we kind of crack ourselves sometimes in regards to really understanding that excellence is all we try to really seek out. And that I used actually in one of our podcasts earlier, I used you guys as an example of how hard you push yourself in high school basketball as athletes, as teammates with each other. And sometimes you need to rely on others to be part of your team. When you individualize yourself to a point when it's just you, all about you, nothing but you, and all you have to do is look at yourself in the mirror every day, sometimes that's a hard standard to hold long term.
Yeah.
And I've lived that part of my life too, and many do, and that's why we can relate to each other across the globe, not just here in Atlantic Canada or Canada. There's, we have people that relate to these stories because they've lived a similar style in their lives, and we just need to, rely on each other, learn from each other, and better ourselves for doing it. So, I know exactly where you're coming from when it comes, not exactly where you're coming from, but certainly have a relatability to understand, what you expected of yourself at a very young age, I might add.
Yeah.
Right. At a young age.
Yeah. A lot of it too, I don't think it's from any particular person or any particular thing. It's more of a lot of what I attribute to societal pressures
Mm.
of
Yep.
success and what you see in magazine. Like everything I read was perfect.
Yeah.
Everything I saw
There's no
was,
such
and
thing.
yeah.
There's no such
So
thing.
in that, and in my master's, like those programs attract highly driven people. And when you're around that for 2 years straight, it fucking mess with me, man.
It wears on you. It does.
Yeah,
It puts you in a
yeah,
pressure cooker, right? And
yeah,
and
yeah,
and then you want to be the best of those.
yeah,
So it's just not easy to wear, right? So
yeah,
so
yeah.
that leads you into
So
another part of your life. So let's head down that
yeah,
path so we can give people an idea.
yeah. So when I started working at Manulife, like I don't really have anything against Manulife now. Like at the time, I probably did because it was a horrid job. But I was doing case management. I wasn't enjoying it. I was deciding on people's health coverage based on a very small box
Right.
of qualifications. It was brutal. So it wasn't what I pictured that OT was going to look like. I had, as many people probably have, or some form of debt, weighed heavily on and sat right here on my shoulders for a
Mm.
really long time. How the hell am I going to pay this back by myself? When I moved in, it was in, so my, depression and my anxiety, I had weight gain. A big part of my story too is my battle with medications, that we can talk about as well. But that started early on. I started accepting that I needed help in my master's in my second year, because leading from my last placements and into graduation, I was like, Mom, like I don't know what the hell is going on. And so I went to talk to someone at Dal, and that didn't go that well because they didn't listen to what I I had said as a patient. And then I went to my family doctor and started the journey of medications and going on and off, because
Trial and
my
error.
body, yeah, my body would adjust very quickly to it, and I'd have to keep ramping up to antidepressants, anti-anxiolytics, and with that comes a lot of side effects. So a lot of the side effects that I felt early on were weight gain when I was like trying so hard to eat right and work out, and weight gain. A lot of, like, for me, and this is a big part of people's lives too, but like sexual dysfunction is like a big
Absolutely.
part of those medications. And that really sucked, especially as like a young guy in Halifax, like trying to meet people and be social, and so that was a big component too. So then I kept going back to my doctor, and I found this one that started really working, and it was great. And it was one of the five pathways was actually going to work for once, and I
Yeah.
wouldn't keep feeling like a fucking zombie at work and in my life. And so leading up until the darker areas, I was on a good medication. I found one that worked. I was taking it every day. I felt good. I wasn't gaining weight. I felt awesome. And then when I moved in, so I was feeling terrible, and depressed, more so from just the work situation I was in. I was smoking cigarettes like heavily, which is not something that I do now. But I started smoking cigarettes to help with the evil thoughts inside my head. It gave me a distraction. It gave
Right.
me a distraction from work. I didn't have to take people's shit on from work. I could, go out to the parking lot. I could go home. I could smoke darts, and it was fine. But I was in a point in my life where I was really lonely, and I, for the first time in my life, was in Halifax trying to do this independence thing by myself, and I crumbled. So the other reason why I crumbled, and I think that I haven't recognized until, you know, the past couple of years, is that I was on burnout fucking, highway straight to the end.
Amen.
And because I was working in case management, but I was also helping run supportive housing nonprofit for men living with major mental illness, and we housed them for a few years. And I continued that work a lot of the time in Halifax, but I was always taking on more work. I was being the yes man. I was being the person that was like, yes, I'll do more.
Oh,
Yes, I'll do more because I need to prove something.
I can relate, Matt. I can relate.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can.
So when I was working at Manulife, obviously things weren't great. I was living in this apartment. And I had the dog, Jax, who's my golden retriever, and I got him at the end of my master's when I had little to no money whatsoever. He was the last resort because I started having suicidal ideations from kind of an early stage towards the end of my master's, because everything was great on the outside to all my friends, and a lot of people had no idea. No one had any idea, but I didn't really want to be here anymore because life was, all the barriers that I had been set up around finances, around being able to maintain my independence as, a young man, were really thrown out the door in my mind, because I just had these ongoing voices inside my head that I wasn't ever going to be good enough. So that carried on into the winter of 2015. And just to kind of give you an idea of how it spiraled downhill, because it did quite quickly. Um, I moved in, I think it was December of 2015. And over the next couple of months, it all sounds great when you're moved in, but I was an hour away from mom and dad, and my brother wasn't really close by, and my friends were all still in Bridgewater for the most part, or off doing something else. And so a lot of the living independently has to do with managing your activities of daily living and your budgeting and banking, and your, being able to clean your apartment regularly, and feeling also like my motivation was shot because I was feeling like shit about myself. I was living in heaps of shame around where I had gotten to in my life. So I was stuck, and I was stuck in this older style apartment building too. And it was rough. So it was a rough neighborhood, a rough building, and it really wore on me. The winters are really hard for me. They always are, and they still are. This year won't be any different. But that, a lot of it came down to being really quite lonely and not being able to have those social connections that I fostered and wanted so bad growing up as a
It's
kid.
amazing. There's a phrase that I've learned from successful business people along the way and they say you become who you surround yourself with. And it sounds to
Yeah,
me at that time there wasn't a lot of people that you were surrounding yourself with. So you were relying on you Inc.
yeah,
The me, myself, and I situation, which is tough because you're wearing it so much and you're not being able to
yeah,
share, information with people that can relate or at least give you some guidance from a real perspective. That's the other thing, is that
yeah,
getting people that have some form of experience, and you're at a point where you guys are all getting out into life with a lot of pressure. And I'm listening to a lot of things like, debt from my education, that's pressure. Performing in my career, that's pressure. Uh, a level of expectation on yourself was another level of pressure. So you're just adding all that on you, saying, Matt, you can do it because you've always done it, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
where does that lead you to at that point?
So it leads to the winter of it would have been 2016, and one day I remember it. I remember both instances very clearly in my mind, but I was having a panic attack. I was a bit, some might hear like manic. I was definitely in that range of feeling like I was going crazy. And I remember I lined up all like the pills that I had at the time. I lined up all of the Tylenol, Advil, cold and flu medication on my bathroom sink. I got undressed. I hopped into the tub, and that was my first attempt at trying to relieve any pain and commit suicide for the first time. So that was my first attempt. I scared the shit out of myself,
Mm.
so I threw everything back, and that was one of the hardest days that I've ever gone through until the next time happened, and that was in February of 2016. It would have been, and that time was the second time, and I had had a shit day at work, and I got yelled at by three different people for their claims, um, and just like felt like, "Well, what the fuck is the point in this anymore?" And the likelihood of a person committing suicide after their first attempt, it just like
It escalates and
increases
gets
without any.
more
Yeah,
and more probable.
so I wanted more of a physical relief that night, and I hopped in the shower again, and I bashed my head into the fucking wall over and over. I'm lucky that I don't have any brain injuries or anything that I know of. But those were two of the darkest nights in my life up until this point. Um, a lot of what happened during that time and the build up towards that was my dog wasn't being taken care of properly. I wasn't taking care of him. I didn't have the skills. I didn't have the skills to do, I could do dishes, but the motivation and the
Yeah.
want to do that was gone. The buildup of shit and urine in my apartment in the spare bedroom was massive. There was garbage all over the floor. I was smoking cigarettes inside the apartment, which is like at my I was at my end point for a really long time, and just bringing my I remember I brought my mattress out to the living room for months. That's where I would sleep because the TV was there and I had cable. So it's the only form of connection that I really had, because I was at a job I hated and at a burnout job that I loved, but I couldn't do anything because it was a nonprofit that didn't have a lot of funding, and it was
Right.
me giving everything when I wasn't really receiving a lot other than like, thanks, Matt. So it's which is good, but it I needed more at that time because it wasn't I didn't have anything of that I would consider worthy, you know?
So
Yeah.
it's like driving down a road and you know the destination. Like you ultimately
Yeah.
at that point I'm driving off to this dead end road. When did
Yeah.
you decide to turn the car around or take a different route? When was that decision made? Like, hey, Maddie, like you got to take an off ramp here and let's get back on track.
Yeah.
How did that happen and when did it happen?
So, well, it's a two-part thing.
Yep.
I so during my really bad days of being mentally unwell, and in that suicidal state, um, and I know my dad doesn't mind me talking about this now, but not coming from a medical background, we always didn't see eye to eye
Right.
on mainly just understanding what I was going through. And mom had a better indication, but still didn't know the
Mm.
extent. So I remember one night I drove home for the weekend, and this was after the attempts and probably a month or so after the attempts. And we really hit a breaking point as a family. And I, kind of let loose. I yelled, I screamed and said, like, I've tried to kill myself. Like, I need help. Like, I don't want to be here. And, from that point forward, it's emotional because it's, a really big growing point of me never really being that strong with finances and managing my finances. Coming from a dad who's an accountant,
Right.
we there was always struggle there. So we had a really beautiful moment after that night of he was like, use the supports that you have at work, use the employee assistance program, and go on short-term disability so you can get help. So I did that, and I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have taken anything. I would have gotten fired because I was at a point where I couldn't do anything. So that was I would say, like, dad and I have always had a great relationship, but from that, like, he changed a lot for me. So that's been like, yeah, a pretty powerful and pretty moving part of my life. And then the second part is my fiance and soon wife to be, Erin. So I was really depressed in the fall, leading up to my suicide attempt, and I ghosted her on texting. So I
Really?
just, yeah, I just didn't do anything because I was at a point where I was just like, why would you want to be with me? And then it came time like after in the springtime. I remember I was doing my first moving day for the supportive housing thing, of moving apartments and helping a guy move in, and I just thought out of the blue she popped up, and I was like, okay, I'll message her, like whatever. And she wasn't going to give me a chance, because like I had done that before, and fair enough. And she was seeing someone else at the time, and then I kind of just gave it all my all one night, sitting on my mattress in the middle of the floor in my living room. I was just like, listen, we worked. So how we met was that we met at Acadia. She worked at the bar, and then we went our separate ways after
Right.
that. Like we didn't talk, and then so I was just sitting on the mattress, and I just said, listen, like I want a chance to like make you happy, and like I know I can. And it like gave me a spark of something, to move forward with. And those early months, so we started talking, went to McDonald's for our first kind of date, and over that, and we started talking, we started hanging out, and then eventually she started staying at my place. But in the middle of that, there was definitely moments of her, I know, of being scared of like moving on with me, because I was in such a bad state of mood swings and not being able to provide for myself. But she stuck it out, man, and she taught me. I mean, my parents had taught me before, but like she really implemented the structure, the routine, and like the caring and the patience and the understanding that no matter, like I'm going to stay, and I'm going to show you that like I can help you get back. And like from there, I started implementing a better routine of taking care of my dog. I started taking care of my apartment. My apartment was clean, and really from there, like I owe a lot of my recovery to like there's other components of, the the army that I've had behind me, but Aaron's been a big part of my life, and being able to propel me forward and building that confidence back up to, that I can do it.
Well,
So yeah.
you're starting to surround yourself with people now, right? So
Yeah.
you're going to
Yeah.
become you're starting to become the human being that you aspire to want to become by surrounding yourself with those people. And then all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I believe, with all the reading that I've done, especially over the last 7 years, is magnetically people seem to connect to you when you open yourself to connectivity. If
Mm,
you're not going to
yeah.
open yourself up to it, if you're not going to expose yourself in areas where you're going to be, in areas where you can communicate, whether it's technologically or physically, be
Yeah.
in places where you see productive people in life that give you the ability to better yourself. And you can better other people at the same time because you have different perspectives than they have. And
Yeah.
I'm starting to hear that story from you. Is I'm starting to say, okay,
Yeah.
dad really has stepped up to the plate, and now I have a girlfriend who becomes a fiance. So yeah, you're starting to see that, and it's starting to take
Yeah.
shape and put you in a better position.
Yeah. And like the next kind of parts of my story are, trying to find someone that I can talk to
Mm,
professionally,
right.
and I've had a battle with that as well. I understand that sometimes it's not going to work out, but my first intake, and that process, I think a lot of people can relate to, is really challenging, especially in rural Nova Scotia and trying to access
Mm,
mental health care. For me, in when I went off on short-term disability, I was suicidal. And I went home, I called my boss. She was fantastic in Manulife, like couldn't have asked for a better person
good.
to help me like try and understand. Like even if she didn't, which I
Mm,
think she did, she was there. And
good.
like that helped me a lot. So I called the intake in Bridgewater for a while, and then I was with a person, and basically our conversation came down to the point of like, well, like what is their why are you so unhappy? Like, what is there to be unhappy about? You have a master's degree. Only 10% of people in the world have master's degrees. And from that moment, I lost a lot of trust because I had already had the time at Dal. I had already had the time where they didn't listen to me. And then I had a time in my intake where I was being put into a box of people who should be happy based on the achievements that they've made. And I left that appointment feeling like absolute shit. I was like, well, where the fuck am I supposed to go? Like,
Yeah.
how can I move forward with this and talk to someone if I'm going to be judged based on the fact that I'm actually feeling these things? So then I moved on and I was still living in Halifax. I was on short term disability and I ended up finding a person who was great. I just couldn't like commit to the commute to actually get down there, and I still wasn't doing good. So because I was on my third or fourth month and we kind of moved forward with some different strategies and I was getting to a better point. And then I remember the day I was sitting in the I think it's Bears Road, the superstore there, or wherever it's close to. It's in Halifax. It's off the highway. I can't remember, but I was sitting in that parking lot, and Classic Insurance calls me and being like, "Oh, we want you to go back to work, and because you're obviously doing better." And I remember breaking down in the parking lot, and I was just like, "What are you talking about? I am losing my mind here. Like, I am trying to find someone. These medications aren't working." And I stuck up for myself for the first time in a long
Yeah.
time.
Attaboy.
And yeah, and she extended because she could hear it. Like, she was actually a person on the other end, and she extended it for until I think the end of September in 2016, it would have been. And then there was a job ad that came up, and I was able to find, I was like, whoa, like this could be the start of something really great.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I needed a change. And I always kind of had the mentality from like dad and just like sticking out a year, at, if you can stick out a year at a job, even if you don't love it, like that kind of ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay with that. I was like, you know what, I can make it a year. I can do that. And but in the meantime, I was still looking for other work, and I interviewed at Dal for this instructor
Oh,
position that
good.
came up. And I was like, this is something I love. I've always loved coaching and teaching. I always wanted to work in a university. I loved Acadia and Dalhousie. To get to learn from mentors and
Mm.
directors and instructors and like, this looks amazing. So I prepared a lot for that interview, and I got the job over another guy. And they told me that I got it over another person, and it was kind of cool because I think I got that job based off of my core values of wanting to connect with people and really enjoying that. And they could see that in the interview. So that gave me, like, you can see the smile on my face, but I still remember
100%.
that.
I can see it. I
Yeah.
see your change right now.
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah. So from like those moments of having the support systems beginning, because I still have more, but being able to have that meaning again and that purpose of a start for a job, was really a game changer for me. So I quit at Manulife, and thanked my boss. She was wonderful throughout the entire time and supportive. And then I moved on to working at Dalhousie University in the OT program, and I got to get back connecting with students and being able to guide them and through like challenges. Not only like, I took a pretty hard stance with mental health as well, and being able to like, that's where my journey kind of started, of teaching and providing guidance on anxiety and studying and burnout and being pushing yourself to the limits as a student, which I think, I hope that students probably appreciated, and I think I was able to provide like a good insight as to what I had been through. So when I was in my first year, of my contract at Dell, I believe, yeah, it was in 2017. One of my mentors and instructors, she was starting a uh, speaker series, so bring professionals in,
I love it.
working
I
professionals.
love it.
Yeah, so lunch and learn type things. And I said, okay, well, I'd love to do that because I have a story for you. and uh, and it it kind of, it was on two fronts there. One, it was going to make me face my fear of public speaking that I had, you know, it was crippling throughout my entire journey
Mhm.
through school. So it was facing that fear with something that I knew very well and that I could talk about. And then also being able to give back, because in a last search for someone who's going through the same damn thing. So I did an hour presentation for Dalhousie OT, and it was some of my friends from school was working at the rehab center and the hospitals, and they came to watch. And it was 70 faculty and students, and I did that presentation. And then I don't know what it's at today, but um, yeah, it was viewed like and watched, like an hour presentation was watched like over 15,000 times, just through Facebook, like not even through YouTube or anything, and just being shared. And from that kind of moment and in time, it really kind of projected me forward on where I am now, and projected me forward in a positive light. It was a lot of mental health when you're caught up in your own shit is so negative, because you have your own critics in your mind, not even anyone else. It's just your own critics
That's the truth.
being like, you're not good enough. You will never be good enough. And I will do everything in my power to make sure that you hear that day in and day out. So being able to give back and being able to talk and being like, I did it. I did it for 60 minutes, and that kind of projected me forward in my contracts to taking on, like, I kept getting more contracts, and I took on opportunities to teach. I taught at the master's level. I taught at the undergraduate level as well. And being able to teach and being able to be in front of students, 120 students at a time, and being able to carry that out were just, massive opportunities for learning and growth, and, facing my fears all the time in a job that I love. So that was really cool too. And then from there, I finished my time at Dalhousie University, and I loved every minute of that, and teaching and being able to be with students. And then I moved on to moving out here, to BC, to start a new journey with my fiance and dogs, and start working in with children with autism. So it's been a pretty cool journey.
Well,
Yeah.
when you think of how a diamond is formed, you know, coal that goes under an enormous amount of pressure for a long time creates a diamond. And a lot of times you got to give yourself some perspective of that. Is hard to do at a young age, because you think this model of success is cookie cutter, and it's not.
No.
Right? It's just not a cookie cutter. The American dream, the Canadian dream from after World War II in the 40s, leading into the 1950s, was this is the way a successful family is supposed to be. And they put this big commercial on television of, dad goes to work, mom stays home, you buy a house, you buy a car, you go on vacation for a couple weeks a year. This is the model life. But in today's complex society, there is no model. There is no cookie cutter process. One of our students that stays here from the Nova Scotia Community College, Jaden and I actually had a talk about it earlier, about living in small town Canada, right? How you know everybody in your community, and you can help each other and share with each other the things that you need, and how much value that provides for you living in a small community. But when you go onto a big university like you did with Acadia, you kind of get lost sometimes in the shuffle, and all of a sudden you're wandering through life going, where am I going? And then all of a sudden you get employment, Matt, where you're living in Halifax, which is 10 to 20 times the size of where you used to live, and you're on your own. And all of a sudden you say, this is what I expect of myself. But all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with the responsibility of, this is not who I should be, and how do I figure this out? And I can do it because I'm Matt Snyder. But the reality is you needed a lot more than just Matt Snyder. And you magnetically figured it out through all of that shit that of what you went through mentally. you still had the ability, because you were a diamond man, and diamonds can absorb the pressure, and then magnetically you sent out those signals and said, I'm ready. I'm ready to
Yeah.
take that different route, and all of a sudden I'm going to take some chances because Matt can do it. That's why this relationship was formed. That's why your father and you connected in a way at that point that gave you some solutions, and
Yeah.
opened some doors for you. So that leads, and that's a path that's typical for people that are trying to find their way.
Yeah.
You're just trying to find your way. And all I'm saying is that from me to you, you've always been, and I'll go back to when you were in school, you always were a special person. You were different. And it was okay to be that, because the reality was, I believe where you're headed is in a place that many people will celebrate the challenges you went through. And what you will do is you will never forget what you went through to get to where you are. And you will be empathetic to people that have gone through a similar situation to what you dealt
Yeah.
with. And that's going to be invaluable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And the people listening to this podcast, I know there's going to be a lot of young people that can relate to you in the pressures that they're dealing with on a daily basis. I was fortunate to deal with you guys and be around you guys for a long time, and girls, because I coach girls basketball and I coach boys baseball, and I was with you guys in the basketball seasons. And
Yeah.
so I had the fortunate opportunity to meet a lot of you personally. And
Yeah.
I'm not blowing smoke up your ass when I say this, because I'll tell it
I
like it
know.
is, and you know that.
Yeah.
You're preparing yourself for much bigger things that I know you'll be able to handle because you went through this. If you
Yeah.
didn't, you may not have been ready.
It's true. It's true. Well, I hope that, thanks for that. And yeah, like I see, I mean, through going through all of this, I mean, it was a good 7 to 10 year span of some really dark times. And I would say, even now, like Aaron and I, like our relationship, I wouldn't say has been any stronger than it is right now. It's a beautiful thing to, and you talked about risk there. And there, I think a lot of my life from recovering from mental illness has been about taking risks, and going with my gut. I have made some pretty strong decisions in my life around my education, around going for it, and sometimes it hasn't been always the most logical route. But a lot of the a lot of the time, it's been more of a going with my gut. Like a light bulb turns on inside of my body, and I just go for it. And I have done that consistently since I've left. Well, even before Halifax, um, I've done that pretty consistently in my life of going with my gut, and there's no science behind it. There's not, it's just it is what it is, and I do know that about myself, is that when my gut is telling me to go do something, I should go do it. So it's worked out very well for me, and it's based off of the most of the time it's based off of the ideas of making my life or making someone else's life better. And you really can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
So it's been a good journey. And I mean, the other kind of component too that's really helped me grow out here is getting into counseling with what I call my unicorn. But she has been probably one of the most influential factors of really diving into the shame that I feel or have felt, not so much anymore, but the shame that I was feeling for years around finances, around not being able to be perfect, around,
Yeah.
not having succeeded or taking on the most, or, helping me with my burnout. And I recommend to anyone who can't, because I know it's not cheap. And if you can't get it for free, I know that it's like, but if you want to give a good gift to your future self and your future, your children or whatnot, investing time and money in a good counselor that you can talk to and actually like apply the things. That's how I've grown so much in 2 years. Has been from the support of Aaron and structure and routine, a job that I love, and bosses that support me. But another portion of it is finding a professional that you can talk this shit with,
Yeah.
because you can't do it by yourself.
You need
You really
mentors. Everybody needs
can't.
mentors, and
Yeah.
you can find if you can't find professional help and you can't afford it, then you need to reach out to mentors in your community that have gone through some situation that you can relate to, because they have the experience. Now that
Yeah.
mentor has to have empathy, and have
Yep.
some experience.
Yep.
But finding mentors gives you the ability to have some kind of idea on the map that you're not alone.
Yeah.
That this has happened to other people in the world, and finding others that it's happened to gives you a sense of understanding that, you know what, Matt, Dennis, I'm not the only one that's experienced this, and I can overcome these hurdles. And I'm just glad that the Matt that, sat with those pills in the bathtub, or rammed his head in the bathroom, in the shower, I think it was more just not living up to your own standards. And it was frustrating for you because you kind of knew, if you were given the opportunity, that you could shine. You knew
Yeah.
it, and you were just frustrated being in the darkness,
Yeah.
and then you get
For so
absorbed by
long.
that darkness. All you needed to do was shine. And that was no different than watching you in a basketball game. If no one ever passed you the ball, right? You just run up and down the floor all day long, then
Yeah.
you have no chance to shine. But when you get the chance to stand out, and you have practiced and worked and relentlessly pursuing the perfection of as an athlete, and then you're given that opportunity, the feeling you get is euphoric.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
elating, because you work so hard to get to that point. That's no different than in your regular life.
No, it's true.
Metaphorically, you
Yeah.
can look at it as what you did as an athlete. It's just that when you're by yourself, you're not practicing with 11 other guys. You don't have those coaches. You're coming home from work every day saying, it's just me, man. And then
Yeah.
those voices seem to creep up in your head and say, oh, it is just you and I,
Yeah.
and I'm going to
Yeah.
pull you in. But you had enough in you, Matt, and I knew it. When I read what I was reading, I always knew you had it in you. And I'm really
Yeah.
pleased that you've come through this journey, because as dark as that moment was, it'll make you appreciate everything you have in your life from here on out.
Yeah. I think so.
Oh, I know
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about your mom.
Yeah.
The first blog that I ever read that you wrote was a
Yeah.
magical, magical blog that we're going to actually put the link in the description, that people can read your blogs,
Sure
because
thing.
it is
Yeah.
it's enlightening, it's encouraging. It just really shows the love and compassion that you have as a human being.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. She's I well, I guess, like, for the blog, I've been looking for a way, like a healthy way. Like, I
Mm,
had been doing it for a while on Facebook, and like that's healthy, but I've tried to like step back a bit more from social media, and more
right.
so just for me, because a lot of that shame, a lot of that comparison had been a routine of thought for me for a long time. So
Mhm.
just me personally, I've tried to stay away from it, falling back and whatnot. So I've been thinking about a way to do it for a long time, and house it in a way. I've always loved writing. I've always loved writing. I might not have been the best in school, but creatively writing is a way for me to get it all out there. And I think I can, from my education and from practice, it's a fun thing for me to do. It's not laborious. So a blog was always the idea. A blog talking about what? Well, mental health and life, and my life leading up to 30 and beyond. But basically, like, the bearded OT was an idea that I had about 3 years ago, and I had pitched it to one of my mentors, and she hadn't said much about it other than like, yeah, that would be sweet. And I just went for it because, like, during during COVID, and everyone's been going through this during COVID, like, it's been segregating. Connection has been lost. And I wanted to do something that would bring people, well, the first thing that I had to figure out for myself is why I was doing this.
Perfect.
And I found that out through talking through friends. And I think early on, and this is just me being honest about it, is that you grow up with social media for so much of your life that you eventually expect, you don't know what's happening on the other end, but you expect certain things of other people in your life. And when that doesn't happen, and you can probably talk to this too about starting a new podcast, like that's a big endeavor as well, but you're expect your internal ego of self expectations of other people in your life are bigger. So for the first couple, I struggled with that, and I spoke with one of my really good friends out here, and he just kind of laid it on the line for me around, well, you're doing this for you because it's beneficial for you and it's therapeutic, and everything else that comes after that is secondary. And whether or not people take anything from it, my intentions behind it was to help other people, but
Right.
really it's helping me.
Of course, absolutely.
I'm doing this for myself because I need to get these dark thoughts out there
100%.
so I can move on from them. So I started the Bearded OT to genuinely help myself, and if anyone could take anything from it, there's multiple themes and there's multiple things that I talk about, and aspects of school and life and failing and shame. But the one with my mom was really special because I don't think many people have experienced that.
No.
Cancer in that way. And so for those that don't know, you can read the blog.
Exactly. I want them to read the blog. I don't want you to release the story too much, because the blog is an incredible piece of writing. It really is. It's an incredible story.
Yeah, thanks.
Incredible story.
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been great to just get it out and put it out there. I've taken a bit of a break, and stepping away from social media as well, just for my own health, but more so along the lines of actually abiding by the advice that I give other people and practicing
right.
what I preach.
We sometimes don't do that.
Yeah, so it's been really good. There are more coming, but the Bearded OT is something I'm very proud of, and something that I set my mind to again. I set a goal around it, and I'm still going with it. So it's really fun. I love writing.
Well, for me, you talk about the podcast that we created. It was really something for Michael and I to do together, because we enjoy working with one another, and he has a skill set and I have a skill set. So, and I actually studied radio broadcasting and television broadcasting as a student. And I mean, I own multiple companies, and through this wonderful COVID situation, it limited my ability to do certain things in certain companies that I owned. So it gave me the ability to do something creatively, but I wanted it to be in a positive sense. So what I wanted to do was take global topics like we're talking about tonight with you, but do it from our community's perspective, because I had the fortunate opportunity to meet a lot of you, influential people along the way that have made an impact on me and have made an impact on other people. And I wanted to put that on stage. I wanted to give people in the world to show, hey, this is where I grew up as a human being. And we had some pretty damn special people that walked through the aisles or drove on the streets, and we don't all live together still in that community, but we're all originally from there, and we've migrated all over the world. And there's some stories that are relatable to help other people in the world to get through shit in life.
Yeah.
And that's really what the journey was all about. And our whole topic is global topics from a community perspective. And depression, clinical depression, is more prevalent today than ever before because of all of the complexities that life throws at us every day. And that's why your story is so relatable. And I wanted to sit down. We haven't had a chance. I mean, this is like Zoom meetings are, Zoom itself, I mean, the company itself has exploded during the pandemic because people that are locked up at least get a chance to stare at each other, and we're thousands of miles apart. And it's like you're sitting in my living room right now.
Yeah, I know.
I can say that it's therapeutic for myself. Every day I get to meet people, and I'm a very personable person. You know that. I mean, I love people. I love what they do. I love their stories. I love the impact that they make on other people, and that's really my motivation behind what I do. So I want to leave something behind that's a positive imprint on the planet.
Yeah.
And that's the journey with
sense.
the weekly Woodcast. So you being a part of it, and having the ability to share, a very intimate story about yourself and opening
Yeah.
yourself up and allowing me to share it with other people. It means a lot to me, man. It really does.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to do it. It's I love talking about it, even though it's hard. I love talking about it because not a lot of people do or can. And it just, if it helps one person get past that dark moment in their life, then I've done what I need to do.
Well,
It's all
nothing
good.
better than to 5 years from now, you're walking down the street and someone said, Matt, are you Matt Snyder? And you look kind of weird and say, like, well, yeah. How do you know that? And say, I watched a podcast one night and I was so depressed and I just clicked on this video. I just wanted to say, you saved my life. If you heard
Yeah.
one of those stories in your life, just one, it's worth every single amount of conversation that we've had and sharing the dark and bright moments that are going to
Yeah.
happen in your life in the future. And there's not hundreds, Matt. There's not thousands. There's not tens of thousands. There's hundreds of thousands of people around the world, if not millions, that are dealing with a lot of depression issues of a
Yeah.
multitude of different things. But the reality is that if we all get in that boat together and row those oars and say, hey, we're not alone,
Yeah.
and the destination is going to be much brighter for us if we all row in those oars together,
Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and someone as big and strong as you are, I have no problem you rowing oars in my boat.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll do an all right job,
You
probably.
will, man.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
got to call Biggie up. So like a Biggie on one side and you
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
other, right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. I really
Yeah. Thanks, man.
am very proud of you that you've well, it's like anything. When you struggle as a human being in the beginning, whether it's a sport, like when you start playing a sport, you're not successful right away. It just says,
No.
the first hoop you shoot, like, you can shoot 100 hoops and only make 4 or 5 of them, but you got to go through it, right? You got to go through it, and the more you practice and the more that you work at something, the more commitment you put into something, something good comes out of it, and that's a life lesson. It really is, and
Yeah.
and the hard thing is you being an athlete. It's transferring that knowledge as an athlete into your professional life
Yeah.
because it came natural for us to be athletic.
Yeah.
And then taking
Yeah.
that and really transferring it into life skills and life opportunities is not an easy transfer sometimes,
No, it's not.
It's not at all. And
No.
and I'm sure there's a lot of people that athletes seem to, it comes so natural for them sometimes, and then all of a sudden you get
Yeah.
into real life where it's just not so easy, and
Yeah.
and really it's about the journey. It's not even about the destination. And part of your journey, I break it down into 3 age categories: 0 to 25, 25 to 50, and 51 to the end. Right? Because we all have a different
Yeah.
ending, right?
Yeah.
So, and you're only on the second part of that in the early stages. So you've got a ways to go. But I will tell you this from my own personal experience. Tracy Lawrence has a song. He says, "Time marches on," and it's true. So surround yourself with good people, and it sounds like you are. I
Yeah.
want to congratulate you and your fiance and your upcoming wedding,
Yeah.
which
Thanks.
it's a magical time in your life. I hope you have lots of kids. I hope they
Yeah.
play
Thanks.
basketball and track and field and all that kind of stuff to fulfill your life, because you're heading towards a time in your life that's going to give you a lot of love and a lot of fulfillment.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
And
I think.
I know all the old BHS alumni are going to love to watch this, and I know they'll reach out to you, and I hope that a lot of those messages and those relationships that you've had over the years will bring you a lot of fulfillment as well, because you were
Yeah.
loved immensely at our school. You were respected by a lot of people, and you were mature beyond your years. So you deserve all that credit, and I'm just looking
Yeah.
forward to the next
Thanks, man.
chapter.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm excited too. Should
Anything
be
else you
good.
want to add, Matt?
No, man. I just I mean, I guess it would just be like, I know a lot of people are struggling right now, and
Yeah.
if any message that I can give is just to, be kind to yourself, take it one day at a time, and just keep pushing forward, because your journey is different than, your neighbors going through mental health. And I encourage people to talk about it more too. I don't think we should just talk about it one day a year. I think we should talk about it all the time, and that's what I'm trying to encourage as well. Because when you're ready, it's quite a beautiful thing to talk about your journey and share with others, because you have no idea how many other people can relate to what you're going through and what they've gone through, and it might help someone. So, yeah,
Amen.
yeah,
Matt Snyder, all the way from British Columbia, alumni from Bridgewater Junior Senior High School and Acadia University. Thank you for joining us in the weekly Woodcast with Dennis and Michael Woodworth.
thanks, man.
All the best,
Really
buddy.
appreciate it. Yeah, you too.
And be
Take
good.
care. Yeah,
That's easy
yeah,
for you.
yeah.